The stiff, bone-chilling wind atop the wall cut at Sam's face. He couldn't help but daydream of his next ranging mission. Time and time again he had proven himself beyond the wall. Reconnaissance, rescue, and most importantly, acclimatization. Any ranger worth his salt can survive many months in this wilderness. Sam knew he had made a name for himself, volunteering to stay 3 weeks in addition to what was required for consideration. As his fellow prospective rangers left Sam as a trainee, they assured him the only thing waiting for him would be death. Little Sam chuckled to himself. The only thing that forced his return south to the wall was sheer boredom. Sam's daydream was then broken by a single horn blast. His eyes stretched across the vast tree line. They strained to locate the ranger headed to the gate 700 feet below him. A slight worry started to creep over Sam as several minutes passed without proper cause of this horn blast. The muffled sound of horse hooves grew less faint. Still no rider broke the tree line. The creak of the castle black gate opening caused little Sam to turn his back on the vast wilderness. The long black cloak of a ranger blew in the stiff wind as it followed its owner across the catwalk. A fresh summer snow blew and covered the top of the wall far above Castle Black. Sam was still perplexed as he approached the topside watch. The watchman, knowing Sam's reputation, immediately answered the question before Sam had a chance to ask.
Riders approaching from the east, at least 10, including the Lord Commander.
The watchman finished. Sam continued past him without bothering to retort. He simply nodded and sprang for the lift. After numerous minutes, the lift finally hit the bottom. Sam quickly slid the cage doors open as a handful of his brothers were waiting for him. Rory, born to the Winterfell's captain of the guard, was the first to greet him. Slightly built, with brown hair and the northern arrogance of a boy grown up in Winterstown.
The Lord Commander has requested you in his office.
Rory Cassell exclaimed with slight excitement in his voice.
Only one reason for a meeting.
Sam Tarly responded with a devious smile.
We going below?
If I'm ordered to command my first ranging mission, I want a northerner by my side.
Sam flattered his friend. The moment was broken by the familiar sneering voice from behind Rory.
Typical,
exclaimed Alan Rose. Sam's eyes refused to leave Rory's dirty face and continuous grin. Alan continued to voice his skepticism, though no one had yet to acknowledge him.
Shouldn't be surprised. Tarly has always been privileged on the wall.
Alan finished with a mild disgust on his tongue. Sam could no longer ignore him and gave Alan the slightest of glances.
And how's that?
Demanded Sam, albeit with a casual tone.
Stark and your father have always been close. You were named the second Ranger of Castle Black at barely 20 years old. And why is that? Only because you slept in the snow longer than anyone else. You still have a lot to prove.
Alan muttered. Sam would hear no more of this rubbish as he pushed through Rory and stood nose to nose with his pompous black-cladded brother. Alan's dirty blonde hair nearly stood straight as Sam's knife was out of its sheath before Alan could blink. Sam knew the penalty for drawing on a brother of the Night's Watch, so he simply picked at his own teeth with the tip of his knife. Alan continued to taunt Sam. He could only mask his nervous nature with arrogance. The start of his next sentence simply brought Sam to a rage. Sam swore he heard Alan say wildling in a disgusted tone. Sam's knife quickly moved from his teeth to Alan's throat. When Sam spoke, he did so carefully but directly.
I didn't just sleep in the snow. I was raised in the snow and crawled across glaciers. I was born beyond the wall, and I'll be buried there. Would you like to go first?
Sam asked, and Alan just twisted his face and withdrew from the spat.
Don't give him any thought.
Rory told his slightly perturbed friend.
He's still bitter, failing out of ranger training 3 times now. Likely he blames me for his failure.
Better get up to see your uncle.
Rory teased, referring to the Lord Commander. Sam then reacted to his friend's taunts without thinking.
He's not my...
Quickly, Sam realized he was being teased.
Fuck right off, Rory.
spat Sam as he smiled and sped towards Lord Commander Stark's office. Little Sam approached the Lord Commander's office as the door was quietly shut in front of him. Sir Hunts had emerged from Sir John's chambers. Sir Hunts commanded Castle Black as Sir John seated his command of all the Night's Watch from Eastwatch now, to oversee the wall's reconstruction. Sir Hunts was a fierce warrior. His greasy hair was pulled tight behind his scarred face. He wore armor emblazoned with flats of dragonglass, gifted to him by King Gendry himself. Sir Hunts led the defences of King's Landing as the captain of the Golden Company during the Dead's onslaught some 15 years ago. He refused to leave Westeros after the Great War and took the Black looking for revenge on the Dead after the slaughter of his Golden Company garrison.
Is there any mission you would refuse, Tarly?
Inquired Commander Hunts with a straight, stern face.
Not likely.
Sam retorted without thinking.
I'll have provisions and a horse prepared.
Sir Hunts replied, and Sam was disturbed at this revelation.
A single horse, as in one.
You still not likely to refuse?
Sir Hunts presumed, and Sam wasn't quick to answer.
Check in with Maester Qyburn before you depart.
Sir Hunts ordered from over his shoulder as he left the young ranger to their Lord Commander.
Understood, sir.
Sam replied just before he knocked on the Lord Commander's door.
Enter,
said the familiar voice Sam knew all too well.
Reporting as ordered, Lord Commander.
Exclaimed Sam. A smile spread across Jon's face as he looked upon his young ranger.
There's no need for such formality in private, Sam. You're an officer now. Please try to relax.
Encouraged Sir John, Sam's shoulders slumped in relief as Jon asked him to sit.
I expect you can assume why I have called you here.
I was hoping for a ranging mission, sir.
Sam responded quickly with a certain gusto.
And that you shall have, Second Ranger.
Sir John paused. Jon turned towards the door and gestured for little Sam to follow. The Lord Commander entered the lift without uttering a word. Sam Tarly followed with eagerness. His heart was racing. He was sure Sir John could hear it pounding through his chest. Finally, the lift reached the top of the wall. Sir John immediately started briefing Sam quietly once they stepped out of the lift. The Lord Commander had no time for small talk.
We sent a team of rangers out from Eastwatch months ago. No communication since then, and they are long overdue.
Sir John paused with a certain amount of seriousness in his voice Sam was not prepared for.
How many, sir?
Inquired the second ranger, although many more questions were on his mind.
The standard 3-man reconnaissance team.
I understand. But why dispatch a rescue from Castle Black?
Simply put, I trust you. What I'm about to ask cannot be easily explained. You will depart tonight under darkness, alone and well supplied. You will trek the haunted forest, and any brother you collect or recover will be taken directly to Eastwatch. I will meet you there.
Sir John finished, and Sam rocked on his heels. What was the point of leading a mission if there is no one to lead?
Secrecy is of the utmost importance. You will report to me directly and speak to no one else.
Sir John demanded without blinking. Sam felt honored as he achieved this level of trust with his Lord Commander.
Is there anything else, Lord Commander?
Yes. Get any one of those men back to me. Alive.
Jon demanded, and without hesitation his second ranger replied,
I will, Lord Commander.
Let me be absolutely clear. If you were to arrive at the Shadow Tower, peppered with arrows, on the brink of death, and I am not present, your secrets die with you. Is that clear, Second Ranger?
Sir John ordered in a singular tone he was famous for.
Perfectly clear, Lord Commander. Lord Commander, you arrived by horse. No one's seen your dragon in quite some time.
Responded a somber little Sam Tarly.
You better get going, Second Ranger. Darkness is nearly upon us.
Suggested Sir John before turning his back, and little Sam Tarly understood his dismissal. Sam departed as ordered and proceeded to his quarters for supplies. He walked a little taller, knowing that Sir John trusted him enough for a dangerous solo rescue mission. But why all the secrecy? Rory was waiting for Sam at the end of the catwalk, slightly protecting himself from the summer snowstorm. Rory's hair was always pulled tightly behind his ears, as most Northmen do. There Sam met him with a slight grin.
Can't talk about it.
Sam interrupted Rory before he had a chance to speak.
Just handle that shit with Alarm before I return.
4 missing teeth or 5?
Laughed Rory, half serious, half joking.
A few weeks only sipping on soup sounds about right.
Grinned a distracted second ranger.
Just weeks.
Asked Rory, now realizing he wouldn't be taking part in Sam's assignment.
You won't be seeing me for a while, Rory. Keep the place from burning down, all right?
Young Tyler Lannister pored over his daily reading as his proud father looked on. Lord Tyrion was determined to explain the purpose of a silent letter K in the word night. Lady Sansa had entered the Hand's chambers to speak with her husband.
The crowds are larger today.
Lady Sansa exclaimed. Lord Tyrion pretended not to hear her. The constant onslaught of hungry peasants and challenging political issues were not normally discussed in front of their son. Tywin, son of Tytos, stammered young Tyler. A beaming Tyrion met eyes with his wife.
Nearly 5 years old, and he already reads better than a Stark.
Teased a playful Lord Tyrion.
And nearly as tall as a Lannister.
Piped in Lady Joanna Lannister. Lord Tyrion again ignored the other lady in their chambers.
Young lady, that is no way to speak to your father.
Scolded Lady Sansa, as she glanced towards her husband for support.
Mother, father knows I meant nothing by it.
Lady Joanna grinned. Lord Tyrion could no longer contain his admiration for his adoptive daughter, now nearly 16 years old. Her long, bright blonde hair and raised cheekbones gave an essence of a young Cersei, though Tyrion never held that against her. Lady Joanna's true parentage was King's Landing's worst-kept secret. Lord Tyrion and Lady Sansa agreed long ago that if they were to have legitimate children of their own, Joanna was never to be treated differently. A challenging feat considering their son Tyler, heir to Casterly Rock, was born to them roughly 5 years ago.
A sharp wit is the expectation of a Lannister lady.
Exclaimed Lord Tyrion with an air of confidence in his niece, now adopted daughter.
I'd prefer a sharp blade.
Boasted the striking Lady Joanna. Sansa allowed them to continue with a slightly disapproving look.
Favor your Aunt Arya, it would seem.
Lord Tyrion replied with a smile.
Well, she does train Princess Brianna daily.
Lady Joanna scoffed at her father's eventual rebuttal.
Would that be your preference?
Not really, although the offer would be nice.
Lady Joanna replied as she collected her young brother Tyler. The Lannister children had departed for a common area as Sansa then approached Tyrion.
Nearly midday.
Another council meeting. The time may come where we actually accomplish something around that damn table.
Lord Tyrion stated bitterly. Lady Sansa then approached him and spoke with a calm confidence.
The expansion of the council to represent all the kingdoms will be King Gendry's legacy. How else can we keep the kingdoms aligned, unless all the people feel their leaders have their best interests at heart?
She concluded abruptly. Lord Tyrion sighed heavily as he knew she was correct ideally. Although having moral ideals combined with good intentions can always be perverted and create more strife than the original issue did. Lord Tyrion's sleepless nights were not to the expansion of the council, but the implementation of the king's command and fallout from the kingdom's high lords. Tyrion knew, as well as anybody, the powerful did not become so by sharing their authority. Now that diversifying political capital will be forced upon these families that went unchallenged for years, How would they react? Lord Tyrion pondered this question as Lady Sansa snapped at him.
Are you listening to me?
She sharply inquired. Lord Tyrion looked up and simply smiled at his wife, realizing how deep his thoughts might have looked to her.
You realize Joanna does that on purpose, pushing boundaries just to see what she can get away with,
suggested Lady Sansa, assuming she would have to convince Tyrion of her rebellious nature.
She reminds me of my sister sometimes, just a little less murderous.
Grinned Tyrion widely. He always knew how to disarm Sansa. He wasn't belittling her concerns. Sansa just knew to never take herself too seriously, because her loving husband would always keep her grounded.
Better get a move on,
urged Lady Sansa as Lord Tyrion set out to descend the many stairs in the Tower of the Hand. Sir Davos caught up with the Hand on his way to the small council chamber. The sound of the men's boots reverberated off the paving stones in the hallway. For multiple minutes, neither man spoke. Lord Tyrion knew Sir Davos was expecting the same questions as last week, but the answers were likely just the same. This worried Tyrion as many issues were facing the Seven Kingdoms. The drought in the Reach was now affecting the third harvest in a row. The gathering of peasants and farmers were holding the lords of Westeros responsible for the exceptionally dry summer. Of the few things Tyrion was not responsible for, the weather was at the top of the list. King Gendry was instilling a democratic council to handle major issues, so all the people of Westeros were to be properly represented. The liege lords of the Seven Kingdoms were to designate a single member to this council. This decision had been met with resistance by most, as the designated representatives were likely to just act as a puppet for each kingdom's High Lord. The issue to be debated next was how to implement the seating of the council members. Today's meeting would be the opening arguments as to who should have the authority to appoint these representatives. Lord Tyrion had arrived to see a full table waiting for his presence. The Hand strolled over to his seat and sat as tall as he could. Meanwhile, Sir Davos helped himself to the final unoccupied seat. Lord Tyrion scanned the table to see all the eyes looking back at him. Yara Greyjoy, Master of Ships, still favoring her lifeless left arm. Lady Missandei of Narth, the King's Master of Foreign Affairs, received her title shortly after the ascension of King Gendry. Lord Varys, the ever-present Master of Whispers, still youthful, and appearing to be no older than 18 years of age. Arya Stark, mother to Princess Brianna, was seated as the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. Grand Maester Wolkan was suggested by Brandon Stark for a role on the small council. Master of War Howland Reed was the oldest member of the council and partook in Robert's rebellion at the side of Eddard Stark. Lord Stark's daughter Sansa Lannister was appointed as the King's Master of Laws. Sir Davos, Master of Coin, cleared his throat to silence the table as Lord Tyrion Lannister, the Hand of the King, began to address the council.
Good day. I'm sure we all are anxious to hear two compelling point of views that will likely shape the kingdoms for generations.
Lord Tyrion paused. His comments drew immediate outbursts from across the table, as he had expected them to.
The High Lords of the Iron Islands support the Council's position of appointees by the Liege Lord,
bellowed Lady Yara Greyjoy with a slight glare.
The point of this representation is to reduce tyranny, not change its face.
Missandei replied calmly but directly at the Iron Islander.
Why a foreigner would have a say in these matters is beyond me,
spat Yara while filling her goblet and setting down the pitcher.
I'm sure there are a great many things that are beyond your comprehension, Lady Greyjoy.
Missandei replied coolly. Lord Tyrion then interjected himself in an attempt to keep the peace.
Ladies, please. We constitute the most diverse small council in recorded history.
Lord Tyrion paused and cleared his throat.
We have lords and ladies born into riches, former slaves and pardoned criminals that have a decision to report to our king, who was born a bastard, I might add.
Lord Tyrion sighed as the arguments continued promptly after he had made his point.
We are here to form a consensus, not to trade insults. Now, where do we stand with the current appointments?
The Iron Islands would appoint Lord Vaelin Greyjoy.
Lady Yara quickly answered.
Lord Tarley has yet to survey the Reach due to the ongoing drought.
Sir Davos reported curtly.
I see.
Lord Tyrion replied. The sheer heat of the current summer was almost too much to bear. Lord Tyrion could only imagine the stress Samwell Tarley must be under. He was again snapped out of his own thought by the next report.
The Night's Watch have already held their election process. They have decided to nominate Maester Qyburn to vote by proxy via a rotating representative of a literate watchman present in King's Landing.
Reported Lord Howland Reed. The King's Master of War continued to explain the Northmen's position.
All houses, both major and minor, voted and concluded that my daughter, Mira Reed, will represent the North.
Princess Elia Martell is still considering Dawn's position on the matter.
Missandei reported, still fuming over her argument with Lady Greyjoy.
The Lords of the Stormlands refuse to appoint a representative until the Council decides on a direction.
Reported Arya Stark, designated to speak for the King's represented kingdom.
Lord Edmure Tully has appointed himself as the representative of the Riverlands, as did Robin Arryn in the Vale.
Finished Lord Varys in a disappointed tone. Just then the double doors leading to the council chambers were briskly flung open by 2 members of the King's Guard. All members in the room stood immediately to welcome the Lord of the Seven Kingdoms. King Gendry modestly walked to the head of the table opposite of his hand. King Gendry always dressed simply, a dark green silk tunic and rustic leather boots worthy of a seasoned blacksmith. His dark black hair was slightly longer than usual as he brushed it away from his eyes and briefly winked at his Lord Commander. Lord Tyrion's eyes shifted to Arya, just in time to see her blush and smile as she tried to hide her reaction by bowing her head.
So sorry to interrupt. Please continue, my lords.
King Gendry commanded as the council reclaimed their seats.
Thank you, Your Grace. We were just about to start opening arguments. Lady Missandei will be representing the people, and Lady Greyjoy will be arguing on behalf of the High Lords.
Lord Tyrion informed his king as Gendry sat up slightly straighter in his chair.
Should be compelling.
King Gendry encouraged as Lord Tyrion nervously shifted in his seat as the arguments began anew. He started to doubt whether a consensus could ever be reached, his thoughts now drowned out by the shouts of the ever-growing crowds outside the Red Keep. He almost longed for the days of his father Tywin Lannister, where arguments could be settled using a strict silence and a stern look. That was loyalty by fear, which is exactly what King Gendry was trying to eradicate. As the arguments wore on, the on-duty King's Guard walked over to the chamber windows to draw close the shutters. Lord Tyrion's shoulders slumped as he knew this would not end well. Princess Brianna was proceeding to the throne room as she was summoned by her mother. A messenger was sent to the royal apartments which likely spoke to her mother's intentions for their meeting. The city watch opened the heavy doors as her footsteps echoed throughout the empty, vast throne room. Brianna dressed simply, much like her father. Green and grey silk, leather pants and low-heeled boots were typical for a training session. As she approached the Iron Throne, she recognized her mother confidently seated and awaiting her daughter. The throne now was significantly different than the stories that described it prior to the Great War. Brianna was raised on the stories of her mother's mission here, riding a dragon alongside her uncle and father, and nearly being burned to death for her troubles. The remnants of the Great War were memorialized in steel to recreate the high back of the Iron Throne. Each of the 7 weapons used in the trial by 7 were copied, and now form the backrest of the large steel throne. The centerpiece was the long war hammer wielded by the smith. Surrounding the hammer were the Valyrian steel twins, Oathbreaker and Widow's Wail, once wielded by the mother and the father. Longclaw and Blackfire were next, both possessed by the Northman warrior and stranger. Finally, on the edge of the backrest was Heartsbane, and a copy of her mother's sword needle. It just so happened that very sword resided on Brianna's hip. She approached her mother, who was comfortably seated on her father's throne.
You're late.
Lady Arya offered coldly.
Sword, staff, or dagger?
Inquired Lady Brianna, now matching her mother's coldness.
Staff.
Her mother simply replied. She removed her scabbard containing needle and leaned it against one of the throne room's many pillars. Arya had left her daughter's staff against that same pillar. She grasped it and began spinning it through her fingers on her dominant hand.
You've forgotten your helm.
Chastised Lady Arya with a slight grin.
I don't need a bloody...
Responded a distracted Brianna. Her lack of awareness was interrupted by Arya's unprovoked attack. Brianna immediately parried her mother's lightning-quick strikes as she was in full retreat. Once 4 or 5 steps into that retreat, the staffs struck each other as Lady Arya's words enunciated with each quick strike.
Suit yourself!
Brianna grew irritated at her mother's taunts. They were commonplace, as their training was not just physical but mental as well. Finally, Brianna was able to set her footing as her mother anticipated this, and struck her midsection with the center of her staff in between her wide grips. Brianna slightly coughed, trying to regain her wind, but she remained on the defensive. Precious air finally started to fill her collapsed lungs while she prepared for another attack. The fact that she was temporarily stunned did not relieve her of a defensive posture. If Brianna seemed to expect the slightest mercy, she would pay for that assumption dearly. Minutes swept by and neither mother nor daughter spoke, just the sound of staffs striking each other and the occasional grunt. Arya had slowed her offensive measures, and Brianna thought to capitalize. Arya attempted a horizontal swipe just as Brianna had expected. Brianna lowered herself into a flat spin and singled up her grip to extend the reach of her weapon. The single swipe, if too low, would break her mother's ankle. If she could strike her calf, it would likely take her mother off her feet. Her attempt was halfway to her mother's leg as Arya leapt to avoid this strike. What Brianna saw next, she wasn't prepared for. As Arya leapt to avoid the strike, she cartwheeled as her feet left the floor. She never loosened the grip of her weapon, as the butt of the staff was the only part touching the ground. Arya used this leverage to then right herself from her inverted position. Brianna's mouth hung open as the butt of Arya's staff left the ground and was quickly uprighted to simply and gently close her daughter's mouth from underneath her jaw. The two ladies laughed as it was silently agreed upon the training session was over. Brianna rubbed her sore jaw as her mother's staff had connected with it at least twice. Brianna noticed a small amount of blood on her hand, as her lip had started to swell.
You drew blood this time,
Brianna claimed while wiping her mouth with the back of her sleeve.
I pulled up before contact.
Arya responded as she turned her back to proceed to the steps leading to the throne.
You've been saying that since I was 7, yet you seem to hit harder each time.
Princess Brianna responded defiantly.
So you've had 8 additional years to get stronger.
Lady Arya responded with a smile. Blood had now dripped onto the grey wolf embroidered onto her blouse. Arya noticed this and silently notified her daughter.
I would have appreciated this kind of training when I was young. You do remember you volunteered for this.
Lady Arya reminded her daughter, and Brianna sighed heavily.
I do, and I do appreciate it. I just can't help but think you enjoy this too much.
Princess Brianna admitted. This comment stopped Lady Arya in her tracks, and she turned to face her daughter. Arya's scarred face was inches from her daughter's when she made her admission.
I do enjoy training you. I enjoy the fact that my daughter will never have to endure something she does not elect to.
Arya admitted sternly, as Brianna had no retort for this. She knew her mother meant well, but she couldn't help feeling like a whipping post sometimes.
Why do you continue to wear the Stark sigil? You are a Baratheon, as I've told you before.
Lady Arya lamented with a softness Brianna was not accustomed to hearing from her mother.
I'm only named Baratheon due to a royal decree.
Brianna admitted with a tone of bitterness.
Others have a different name for me. Surely you must have heard.
Princess Brianna inquired as Lady Arya avoided her eye.
I've only ever heard it once. They don't speak much anymore.
Lady Arya retorted reluctantly.
Well, the bastard princess does have a nice ring to it.
Brianna retorted. She knew she had disarmed her mother. It was a topic she wanted to breach for a long time. It was the very reason she wore the grey wolf sigil of House Stark. When her mother retorted, she did so carefully.
I was born to be a lady, though I never became one. And if I was never a lady, I could never be a queen.
Lady Arya continued after a brief pause to swallow her stubbornness.
I love your father. I always have. But I'll never be forced to be something I'm not.
Lady Arya sighed heavily.
No amount of blood or bruises can teach you that lesson.
Arya finished. Brianna could never understand her mother's stubbornness regarding her lack of marriage to her father. How is it that she, a princess, could be shipped off to the Reach or the Kingdom of Dawn, then be forced to enter a marriage just because her father was an unmarried king in need of a strong alliance? This had frustrated Brianna for years and had been the topic of many conversations. She knew at the very least that her father would negotiate a good match. Brianna felt attractive, slender, tall, deep black hair, and green eyes that covered the mind of an independent thinker. She was born in the Red Keep just months after the battle for the Dawn. Her mother carried her through many of the battles, and she was unlikely to even be here if not for her mother's lifetime of training.
Please wear a dress to dinner tonight. Your father wants your opinion on a few matters.
Lady Arya asked of her daughter. Brianna shrugged at the thought of being told what to do, but as a princess she had become accustomed to it. The royal apartments were still flooded with the shouts of the many peasants contesting the selection process to the expanded council. Princess Brianna entered the dining chamber with her mother's direwolf, Nymeria, closely in tow. The king and princess's mother had already taken their seats.
You look lovely this evening, my daughter.
Beamed King Gendry as he returned to his seat. The Red Keep servants had begun the first course. Brianna couldn't help but think of the many common folk bedding down this evening with empty bellies due to the ongoing drought. She knew her father rejected the lavish lifestyle of her grandfather, King Robert Baratheon, but she could never speak as to the feeling of acute hunger. King Gendry commented on her swollen lower lip, and Lady Arya gave a brief overview of their earlier training session. As the first course was served, her father claimed a hold on the conversation.
I wanted to address the issue of your courtship and betrothal.
King Gendry smiled, probably thinking she would be excited at the prospect. Brianna just lightly picked at her food and gave the occasional eye contact and charming smile at her father as he stumbled on. She assumed there was a discussion behind closed doors on when and how to broach this topic. Brianna knew her mother was expecting an outburst. How could Lady Arya force her daughter to marry when she herself had always refused the custom? She could feel her mother's stare as she listened to her father's words. All the while she remained silent.
We intend to have you tour the Stormlands and meet with their lords and heirs. Might there be one to your liking?
King Gendry smiled. Brianna was being given a choice on the matter. The expectations set upon her as the heir to the Iron Throne were never in doubt. However, the fact that the daughter would wed before her mother was never expected by any other lords residing outside of this very dining hall. Lady Arya's lack of effort to change the subject revealed her mother's intentions. Arya must have wanted Brianna to broach the subject. Events always seemed to unravel just as her mother desired them to. Brianna refused to be predictable and refused to contest at this time. Nothing her father uttered was even worth remembering. He hadn't properly prepared himself again, just as Lady Arya had probably designed. The only thing the king had properly communicated was his apprehension over the issue at hand. This and this only was the idea Arya had wished to impress on Brianna. Maybe it'll be another 15 years before I broach the subject again, Princess Brianna thought to herself. Lady Roslin of House Tully made her way across the bridge connecting the twin towers at the crossings. She had urgent business to discuss with her only and eldest son. She decided to give him command of the southern tower due to the fact that no true-born males of House Frey remained. Slowly she climbed numerous steps to get to her husband's heir, her beloved son Lord Brynden Tully, the only living child of Lord Edmure Tully. Not that he had any sort of a relationship with his son. Lord Edmure rarely wrote and had never visited the twins since his imprisonment by House Frey decades prior. She briskly entered her only son's bedchamber. Her summons had been ignored thrice over. Young Brynden Tully had ordered his chamber's candles lit as the sun touched the horizon on a very hot, dry evening here in the Riverlands. Here at the twins of the crossing sat the heir to House Tully with crumpled parchment at his feet. Lady Roslin righted a jar of ink from his desk as the ink continuously spilled onto the floor.
Has your father responded?
Inquired Lady Roslin, though it was more of a statement than a question.
Unfortunately.
Spat Lord Brynden as Lady Roslin knew of multiple issues that could flare her teenage son's temper. The honor of House Frey being one, his own honor was another.
You ignored my summons. Tell me of your troubles, my son.
Demanded Lady Roslin, though in a soft voice.
Father refused me.
Answered Lord Brynden, now matching the softness in his mother's voice.
I see.
Lady Roslin answered in a questioning tone, trying to urge young Brynden to continue.
He refused to name me to the High Council as the representative of the Riverlands.
Lord Brynden complained bitterly while crumpling his latest attempt to scribe a letter.
I'm sure he had proper reasoning.
Lady Roslin retorted while maintaining a certain amount of optimism.
Oh, that much he made very clear.
Lord Brynden revealed as he casually kicked the crumpled letter across the stone floor of his bedchamber.
He's concerned with my desire to see House Frey continue to exist. He fears I'll petition the king for legitimization.
Lord Brynden had revealed bitterly.
Tully is our house, my son. The Frey name will be lost within a generation. All true-born Freys fell during the sacking of the twins. You know only bastards and women remain, as does the king.
Lady Roslin finished reminding her son what he had already known many times over.
That's what I aim to correct.
You made these intentions clear to your father, even when he refused to ask the king. Remember, House Frey imprisoned your father for many years, and a wolf still warms the king's bed.
Lady Roslin reminded him.
Bastards take their father's names now. Remember, Mother, the laws have changed.
Lord Brynden exclaimed to his mother's dismay.
The fathers must claim their bastards. Old Walder died at the same time as all his true-born sons.
Lady Roslin corrected.
Why are we speaking of House Frey? When your lack of appointment is really what is troubling you.
Lady Roslin paused and offered her son a chance to retort.
If your father intends to sit the council in King's Landing, perhaps now he would name you Lord of Riverrun.
Lady Roslin attempted to sound optimistic. Lord Brynden's face slightly twisted.
He has yet to even name me Lord of the Crossings. Why now would he seat me at Riverrun?
Lord Brynden asked, and Lady Roslin offered no answer as she picked the parchment off the ground and attempted to smooth it out.
Your father's imprisonment brought many changes to him. We've never shared a bed since he was released. It is why we reside here, not at Riverrun with our lord.
Lady Roslin spoke almost to herself. Her eyes glanced at the half-written letter in her hand.
You were writing to Robin Arryn.
Yes, my cousin has offered me great counsel since my last visit to the Vale.
The Arryns have always been wise beyond their years. Draft a letter to your father, promising to forget this foolishness of preserving House Frey's name. Perhaps he'll reconsider appointing you to the King's Council.
Lady Roslin smiled as she approached the door of the bedchamber.
I'd be happy to look it over before you fly the Raven. You know how you sound when you're upset. We want to convince him, not deter him.
Lady Roslin finished, and Brynden agreed with a stiff nod. The door softly shut and Lord Brynden spun on the spot. He raged internally to think his father despised him and his mother because they share blood with the Freys. His cousin Robin Arryn was correct in his assumptions. Lord Brynden held out hope his father would someday ride into the Twins and bring him back to Riverrun, the proper seat of House Tully. He felt ashamed he could be this naive. If Lord Edmure Tully wanted to treat his son and heir as a Frey, then I would live as a Frey, thought Lord Brynden to himself. Three weeks beyond the wall, and little Sam Tarly had yet to run through his rations. Salted beef, mulled wine, potatoes to be boiled were just a few of the delicacies remaining to him. His horse had not eaten so well and would tire earlier and earlier into the day as the weeks passed. Staying warm was not difficult while making his way through the haunted forest. Trees were plenty to burn and provided the necessary cover. His heading continued to the northeast, and it would eventually take him through a familiar ranger outpost, Craster's Keep. Constant supply runs through the years had kept Craster's Keep well supplied for passing rangers, mostly for their horses. The lack of any wildling presence made it as safe as it was remote. Little Sam proceeded down an embankment as his sure-footed horse twisted and swung around numerous thick tree trunks. A clearing had presented itself as the tree line melted away. The tall pickets protecting the keep had burned and rotted away. They once protected the keep until only a skeleton remained. The second ranger had reached his outpost as well as his birthplace. His horse eventually feasted on the damp straw as its ranger filled the manger. Little Sam started a small fire and helped himself to his remaining rations. Night crept over the keep as Sam explored the grounds more thoroughly. He searched for any sign of the previous rangers. The Lord Commander had said very little regarding their mission, but his own instruction was very clear. Find them quickly. His trek had come easier than he was expecting. The summer snows were rare during the drought, as were the rains in the southern kingdoms. Sam's father had mentioned in his letters more times than little Sam could count. After 2 nights, Sam rode out of Craster's with a full belly and a well-rested horse. Nearly 2 weeks passed as Sam trekked northeast. He had been north of the wall for nearly a month when he unexpectedly arrived at the Shivering Sea. He must have lost track of how much time had passed when he came across a watchman's cloak and sword by the seaside. It was impossible to ascertain how long they were there, or whether they belonged to the rangers he was trying to locate. The blood-stained snow remained under the cloak, but neither flesh nor bone remained. Maybe wolves, Sam thought to himself. Either way, there was a naked, unarmed ranger in need of assistance. It's doubtful a bear would have asked his brother to unrobe before devouring him. Upon further investigation, Sam noticed a skull shining bright white on its perch of vivid blood red. Sam examined it closer. It could have been a fossil if it wasn't for the tacky red blood left behind. Odd, isn't it? Sam said aloud, almost speaking to his horse. Gulls whined overhead as waves crashed over the shoreline. Sam would find a cove somewhere farther north. Perhaps some shallow water spear fishing would provide a break from salted beef he dined on continuously. A small campfire crackled as the captured whitefish sizzled slightly. Once he had served himself properly, he immediately put out the campfire to attempt to restore his night vision. He constantly peered over the horizon, always looking for signs or indications he was on the right track. Finally, for the first time since he departed the wall, he saw signs of life other than his own. From the side of his cove, off in a distance, he strained to be sure his eyes were not playing tricks on him. A small fire was seen on the ridgeline. A brief calculation made his eyes widen. The only thing north of him on this shoreline was Hardhome. Sam quietly dined on his fried whitefish, contemplating his next move. The fire was miles to the north. He could sleep well and move at first light, or follow this possible mirage off a steep cliff on this moonless night. Sam decided any true ranger would push onward given this possible lead. The Lord Commander was counting on him and him alone. Sam trotted his horse quietly along the shoreline. He presented an easy target for an ambush of any size, but the lack of moonlight made it the stealthier option. Once the shoreline no longer provided onward movement north, Sam dismounted and secured his horse. He cautiously climbed the rocks and boulders that obstructed his path. The height would provide a proper line of sight to his target. To Sam's surprise, he achieved an overwatch of Hardhome itself. He had not realized he had made it so far north so quickly. The smoldering embers of the campfire that led him here were almost extinguished. It provided him very little as far as reconnaissance. Sam decided to wait until dawn, observe what he could and move again once night presented itself to him once more. Come first light movement started to stir, he could make out 2 men around the remains of the campfire fast asleep. The many cabins surrounding the courtyard where the men slept had its occupants scurry about. They were tall men, skinny, almost floating over the snow that covered the ground. They were just odd enough to make Sam's stomach a little queasy. Men, warriors, and wolves worried Sam very little, but Sam knew of the supernatural that plagued these lands, though he had never witnessed it himself. Sam's attention was again drawn to a single man leaving one cabin and approaching the next. Sam saw his knees bend, which was a relief. He was just a man with no weapon, as Sam could see. His cloak was a pale blue and very thin, too thin to properly protect a man this far north. Sam continued observing until the sky began to darken. The sleeping men under their cloaks had refused to move through the course of the entire day. This would be Sam's first investigation. He slowly climbed down off his perch, occasionally pushing small stones over the edge to a dull thud on the snow below. Sam drew his sword and approached the bodies near the cold campfire. He slowly pulled the black cloak aside, revealing that which he had seen previously. A bloody pool and a dry, bright white skull. His heart raced and his brow moistened. He quickly pulled the other cloak aside. It was not black, patchy, thin, almost as if it was made of squirrel hides. More blood, more skulls. Just then Sam heard the unmistakable sound of a horse scream. His horse, as the sound was unmistakable. The screams began to become more pronounced and louder, closer and closer, until it was ringing in his ears. He sprinted for cover. He was now known to whoever these people were. His horse continued screaming. It was surely dead already, though the screams persisted. This was dark magic. Sam dropped his sword and covered his ears while crouched between 2 cabins. The screams were deafening as Sam's mouth hung open. He couldn't even know if he was screaming himself because his dying horse was all he could hear. The sound abruptly stopped as his ears continued to ring. He was on his knees, face buried in the snow with gloved hands over his head. He stirred slightly just as a searing pain sliced through his boot. He retracted immediately to inspect the cause of this injury. His boot had been cut through cleanly as the back of his heel bled profusely. This was not an animal bite, only the sharpest steel could have cut so cleanly. Sam rose to his feet painfully, retrieved his sword and started limping towards his horse to find what remained of him. As Sam turned the corner, he looked for his next point of cover. He scanned across the campfire to see the slender man in thin blue silk, his hood up covering most of his face, and a blade in his hand. His back was turned to Sam as he slowly began the process of attempting an escape. A fight was not out of the question, but Sam was injured and he had no idea how many men were present, though he had only seen one at a time. Every few steps, Sam would pause to listen. Unfortunately, the steps in the snow continued as he paused. Sam was still being followed. He was sure of it. Sam just had to get to the other side of this large boulder to get to his horse, who he prayed was unharmed. The pain of his heel throbbed, and he started to feel lightheaded. His gloves soaked with the blood of his heel had become tacky, and his gloved finger stuck together as he handled his sword. Sam sensed the enemy was closing. It wouldn't be that difficult given his slow process. Sam finally successfully flanked the boulder to see his horse missing. His shoulders slumped as he turned to face whatever was behind him. Before he squared his shoulders, he felt the powerful impact with his chest that knocked the wind from him. Sam fell to his knees to see half a blade protruding out of his chest. Sam's remaining energy left him as he raised his head to closely see the hooded man approaching him. His face remained obscured, but Sam could clearly see the man's pale blue lips smiling at him. Sam collapsed to the ground, his mission incomplete. He found 3 bodies, but only 2 black brothers, and one he could not identify. Suddenly the pain stopped, as did the feeling of the bitter cold. This vast white wasteland that had once been his birthplace would now be his funeral site, Samwell Tarly thought as his final breath had left him.
Oh dear. Rest easy, Ranger. We'll get you back to your brothers.